Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Louise. Hello and welcome everyone to our first Media Violence Prevention webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce Ray Hughes and Shanna Burns, our facilitators this evening. Shanna is an educator and researcher for the CAMH Center for Prevention Science. She assists with the 4th R program development and implementation initiatives and has helped with the Grade 8 Health, Grades 9 to 12 English, and the Media Literacy curricula. Shanna has worked with many at-risk youth, both in mainstream and alternative education settings. She has worked with students on First Nations communities and recently completed adaptations for an Aboriginal Perspectives after-school program. Welcome, Shanna. I've had the pleasure of working with Ray Hughes since 2007 when he presented at the OECTA Bullying Prevention Conferences, and again in 2010 at the OTF Media Violence Prevention Conference. Ray is an experienced educator and currently the National Education Coordinator for the 4th R project with CAMH Center for Prevention Science, a consultant and research associate at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, and is the course developer and guest lecturer in Safe Schools at the Faculty of Education at the University of Western Ontario. You need to know that both Ray Hughes and Peter Jaffe, who unfortunately will not be able to join us tonight because he's quite ill, have been instrumental in making the OTF Media Violence Prevention webinars a reality. Thank you, Ray and Peter and Shanna, for being here tonight. So welcome everyone, and now Louise has given me the big job of turning back a slide, so we'll see if I can do this. Whew! I'm very excited about this, that I actually did it correctly. So it's good to see that we've got good representation from Southern Ontario anyhow, and I won't take any more time. I'll pass the mic over to Ray and Shanna. Welcome both.
Well, thanks, Syria, and thanks, Louise, for getting this set up for tonight's webinar. I'm just going to do a few introductory comments. First of all, Peter does send his regrets. He was so looking forward to participating in this webinar, but as Syria has mentioned, he's quite ill tonight, and he's not able to make it. So I wanted to send along his regrets. And what's going to happen in this webinar, I'm going to start the webinar and go through some slides, and Shanna then is going to complete the remaining of the slides. But however, throughout, if we have questions, either Shanna or I will address your question depending on who who may have the answer for it. I just want to mention to you that we have been developing media violence presentations for about 8 years, as Syria has mentioned here, and we deliver presentations to students in classrooms, both at the elementary and secondary level. In addition, we have developed different types of presentations for parents, some of them dealing with the impact of media violence, others that deal with cyberbullying, etc. So the information that we're going to present tonight focuses primarily on awareness and the need for media literacy and further education. It's not about censorship. We hope at the end of this that Shanna and I both inspire you to learn more about the topic and spark an interest in point you in the right direction where you can get additional resources to either support your classrooms or even for your personal use. So let me get myself organized here. This is a topic that it's been around for a long time, and in fact, in front of you right now, you see the American Academy of Pediatrics came up with this quote. But prior to that, back in 1997, I'm just going to read a quote to you that they came out with a warning then, and the quote says, "The level of violence to which children are exposed through the media has reached such horrific proportions. Health professionals, parents, legislators, and educators agree that something has to be done about it." So, you know, here we have one of the most reputable organizations in the world, let alone in the U.S., coming out with a pretty bold statement. And then 12 years later, they come out with the statement that you see in front of you today. And in fact, the Academy has done a significant amount of work in this area, and I want to direct you to their website that you can peruse it and get a lot of really good additional information. So that's at www.aap, the American Academy of Pediatrics.org. So you get a chance later, make sure you visit that website. I'm sure that you'll find it very, very useful. Our next slide gives us some pretty alarming information, and I should have forewarned you. I've got to give you the bad news tonight at the beginning. We were flipped a coin, and Shanna and I had an opportunity. What's the good news? What's the bad news? And I lost the toss, and after I lost the toss, Shanna and I had a discussion. I said, look, I can't give all the bad news. You're going to have to give some of it too. But for the first part, I'm going to present some facts to you, and it's going to focus really on giving you some awareness about the consumption of media and what our youth are up to today. So by the time youth graduate from high school, they're going to probably spend about 15,000 hours with media and only spend about 12,000 hours in the classroom. So you can see that it's really important that we understand the impact that this time is having on our youth, and that's why many researchers are really interested in doing the research and also in further understanding the need that this impact might have on them. I love this quote that you see here from Linda Stone. Linda says, you know, the most that we can expect from our children today, particularly our students in the classroom, is continuous partial attention. I think that's quite amusing. So even though we know that our kids are spending all this time, the reality is that most parents are having trouble. They're having trouble penetrating their child's media-soaked universe. So today our children are called Generation M for the multitasking and the multimedia environments that they're participating in. No doubt you've probably witnessed your own children text messaging, listening to music, doing homework all at once, or watching television while they're twittering and they're chatting on MSN with their friends. You know that some kids can have up to 20 instant messages conversations going on at one time. And still, they're able to track and they're able to tell you what's going on in all of them. In addition, you may have heard the term the millennials or the net generation. These are the first to grow up and come of age with our new media technologies. They're the ones that have mastered and are working with the internet, digital music, televisions, videos, cell phones, and any other interactive media that you can imagine. So this new media has transformed the social landscape of children and youth. It's allowed them to connect them with their peers like never before, including online on a daily basis, either through IM, instant messaging, or email or message boards, chat rooms, and with the peer culture through social networks like MySpace or Facebook and Twitter, blogging, etc. Keep this right up here so I can... So I have next here, I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of statistics, but I wanted to present a few statistics for you. So first of all, when we take a look at the average teenager spends about 8 hours a day with media, and when we compare that with other things that youth are doing, such as an hour spent on average on chores and the amount of time that they're spending in other activities, including homework, we realize that the impact that this is having. In addition, this 8 hours that they're spending doesn't even take in consideration multitasking that they're doing. And if we took that into consideration, it would probably average out to about 11.5 hours today. In addition, we can think about 20% of youth today are what we call hypertexters. So hypertexters are youth who send on average about 6,000 messages per month. Now, there's been numerous studies done to look at the correlation between youth who are coined hypertexters and other problem behaviors, and it's quite disturbing actually. So I have a couple things here for you that that I've got from some studies that I pulled together. So if we take a look at kids who are doing this, that have been classified in this area, that they're at higher risk for the likelihood to have sex at an earlier age, or what we call early daters, somebody who starts dating before the age of 12. Greater percentage of them have higher rates of absenteeism from schools. They start smoking at a younger age. More of them are smoking. More of them involved in binge drinking. They spend, on average, considerably more time on social sites, up to 3 hours per day. So we've seen a direct correlation with that, and of course, it's worrisome for researchers, and it has certainly implications for not only parents but also for educators. The other information on the slide: 71% of youth have a TV or video game console or computer in their bedroom, and for the most part, they're not supervised. Within the bedroom, 77% also have a smartphone. 39% of youth have admitted to sending a sext. We see older teens are more likely to have cell phones than younger ones. Websites such as Text Them Now, TXT EM Now, or Sneak MSS, and 5-digit text allows users to actually use their phone to make sure that when they use a phone number, they have anonymity. They can send text messages under anonymity. So it raises a lot of red flags and a lot of concerns for us. Again, on the line of some stats and just on consumption of media and what our children and our youth are consuming today, we can see by the age 18, they'll have witnessed 200,000 violent acts on television and 70,000 murders. In 2007, 29,000 convicted sex offenders were found on MySpace, and that certainly doesn't even account for those who used an alias name. These are actually, people who have been convicted that were using their names. 60% of female video game characters are sexualized. Playing video games doubles the amount of dopamine in the brain. Nearly 2 out of every 3 TV programs contains violence, and you see about an average of 6 violent acts per hour. Kids will actually see about 250,000 commercials aimed at their appearance by age 17. So having said all this, and knowing the violence that they're being in the media that they're saturated in, what about the impacts? What does the research tell us in terms of possible impacts that might have? And I want to caution because, and let you know that certainly, every kid who plays a violent video game or watches a violent movie or who is a hypertexter is not going to be our next school shooter. That's certainly not the case. So not all children are susceptible to the consequences listed on here, but certainly research is mounting on the correlation between exposure to media violence and the resulting behaviors and attitudes that we see. And from current brain research, we know that the teenage brain is still undergoing dynamic growth, and it's very susceptible to outside influences during this rewiring phase. So at one time, as you know, the research had told us that everybody thought that the brain was already hardwired by the time they were in early teens, and particularly in later teens. But that has all been debunked with our great technology that we have today to look at this. So here's what we see. We can see opportunities. I mean, when somebody consumes violent media, certainly if you just think from your perspective as an adult, if you watch a scary movie, you can have a nightmare. So you can imagine the impact that this has on younger children. Stereotypes are promoted. There have been numerous studies that have been done looking at movies and at television programs, and we see that, for example, that black people are overrepresented as villains in movies, promoting high-risk behaviors. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Imitation, I'll talk more about that, certainly increases that, and I've mentioned a little bit about how it can alter brain development, which now certainly there's mounting research for that. And the second last item about desensitization, the more and more that our children are exposed to this, it certainly desensitizes their reaction. I mean, one only needs to think about the violent movies, and when they come out with the sequel to a violent movie, what do they have to do? Well, you know, the makers of the movie have to glorify the violence even more. They have to go to the next level to be, you know, to have the violence even more extreme than the previous one if they're going to fill their movie theaters. My next slide here, you know, as we go through these slides, don't worry about not recognizing every single person on the slide or understanding who they are. Certainly you'll get the theme of this I talk about. But sometimes, and this is one that's dear to my heart because I have a background in coaching and in sports, and certainly sometimes our role models in sports are less than desirable role models. Up in the left-hand corner, this is a very, very popular sport that happens. I'm sure you're familiar with UFC, Ultimate Fighting. And if you watch this, and if you listen to the pre-fighting remarks made by the athletes in terms of the destruction that they're going to do to their opponents, it's very disturbing, the messages that they're giving. When they put them in these rings and the amount of physical harm that happens. You know, we've had a number of cases where we've had some role models, some very popular role models in the Ultimate Fighting Club, such as Justin Levens, who at 28 had a couple of UFC fights, and you know, he was a regular fighter. And Justin's believed to have shot his wife before killing himself in Southern California. I mean, kids are following these people. We have Oscar Pistorius in our second, in the middle up in the top here, and I'm sure you're familiar with the allegations of that Oscar shot his girlfriend. He thought she was an intruder. You know, people have been talking about that they had been arguing after Valentine's Day. Rumors had come out about their relationship, that he was abusive. The right-hand side, a very famous picture of Zidane, the soccer player who was red carded in 2006 World Cup for headbutting. We have in the bottom left-hand corner, and it's not restricted, of course, to men. Here we have Serena Williams. You may remember this at the U.S. Open, where Serena actually was fined and actually barred from playing for a couple of tournaments after she had threatened to kill a linesperson for making an inappropriate call. And it basically, you know, there isn't any sport that it doesn't touch. We could go on, and I could spend the entire evening giving you examples of role models. The last one being from Belcher from the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, he had a blood alcohol level more than twice the legal limit, and he shoots his girlfriend 9 times, you know. And as I say, we could go on and on. So we think about these role models, and some of our role models in sports are wonderful. They're great, great people, but you don't have to search very far till we find some really high-profile sporting role models that are giving, at the very least, some mixed messages to our youth. And we can move on. I mean, we can move on, and we can move from sporting to music. And when we look at music and the messages sent to our youth, we needn't look far, too, to find some negative messages. In fact, at times it's hard to find positive messages. And here we have, certainly as you read through this, the promotion of violence. I know Shanna may touch on this a bit later, but Shanna, one of her things that she's really involved is in dance, and when she's looking for music for her young dancers, she has to search really, really far to find music lyrics that are appropriate, that don't have content in it that are either offensive or degrading to women, or have a message that's giving a violent message. Again, you know, we have artists that are pushing the boundaries and releasing songs about domestic violence. It started with Rihanna and Eminem, "Love the Way You Lie" video, and you know, all sorts of different messages. And we, again, could spend this entire webinar just decoding and analyzing music lyrics and having a discussion about that. And when we move on, our youth are also bombarded with, just generally with the topic of unhealthy relationships. When we think about and we're sitting in our classrooms and we're having discussions and wonder why our youth are having trouble maintaining a healthy relationship or dialoguing with their peers in a healthy relationship, and we start looking at some of the role models either on TV or in the print or through music, it starts to make a little bit of sense to us. Take the very, very popular TV show Jersey Shore, where we get messages on violence, sex, drinking, and abuse. Once again, the bottom right-hand corner, Chris Brown and Rihanna. Probably one of the most difficult situations to unfold was when Rihanna started dating Chris Brown again. I know, and I get emails, all the time that women all over the world were horrified not only by the choice that she made, but the message that she has sent to young women. So, and then again, we put in here Tiger Woods. I mean, Tiger Woods was such a role model to both boys and girls, and not only in the world of golf, and his unhealthy behavior in terms of his infidelity certainly rocked a lot of people, including our youth who follow him. So when we move on and think about the messages, so what are these messages that our youth getting? And if they haven't had some experience or some lessons in critical media literacy, how are they decoding these messages? And many of the messages really deal with unrealistic consequences. So when they're watching a TV program or a movie and they see youth involved in drinking all the time, and the drinking is associated with having lots of fun and involved with a lot of sexual activity taking place, you never really see the consequences, the fallout from what's taking place. So they're really getting mixed messages. And on one hand, we may have artists or role models seemingly trying to give a positive message, but on the other hand, they're seeing them in circumstances that visually it's not a positive message for them. Down in the right-hand corner, we have the room or the show that's put in there. I'm drawing a blank here. Modern Family. You know what? And it's a very, very popular show, and it's a good show. But when we think about all the problems in that show that get resolved in 30 minutes, it's unrealistic. Many of these problems are really, really complex problems. So it's presented to you in the first 5 minutes of the show. You get the problem, and in the last 25 minutes later, this very complex problem is resolved. In the image that you see in the middle at the bottom that says Bubblicious here, when we take a look at advertisements and we see, in this case here, American Apparel, where we're seeing some soft porn, and we're seeing more and more messages that are targeting our children at a very, very young age. And for example, in this one here, American Apparel targets 4- and 5-year-olds in their ads, and they actually have very, very young children dressed in provocative ways in underwear, etc. And there's lots of dangers in terms of reality TV, because one of the attractions of reality television is supposedly the reality of it. It's supposed to be unscripted and unplanned situations and reactions. And that's the way they're duping our young people to think. So one of the ethical problems of reality television is the fact that it isn't nearly as real as it pretends to be. For example, at least in dramatic shows, one can expect the audience to understand that what they see on the screen doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of the actors' lives. The same, however, cannot be said for these reality shows, because they are contrived. They're heavily edited. They're contrived in nature. So there have been different reporting people, have reported on this matter and on how it's been contrived and how the manipulation is happening. It's being exposed more and more. So again, we get some mixed messages that that our youth are getting with regards to this, where we know these are really, really popular shows. Try to watch it, go through an evening and scan through your menu of TV selections that are made available to you, and you'll see at least every single night you have the option to watch one or more of these shows, and it's a huge attraction. But again, what are the messages that our youth are getting watching these reality shows in terms of the consequences, in terms of solving these complex problems? They're not good ones, to say the least. Moving on to the theme of dangerous behaviors or imitation. I'm sure that you're all familiar with copycats behavior, and we're certainly concerned about that. So what we need to do is we need to help our children question the impact that media has on their behavior and their choices, because media is not always a vehicle to encourage healthy examples or role models. We think, with critical media skills, it'll help them to decode and realize what's real versus entertainment. Shows like Jackass, for example, and Nitro Circus teach our young boys to be tough, to be a warrior, teach them to take risks, or get ripped, don't cry. You better be certain that these behaviors and attitudes are being mimicked online. It's happening. I've had many examples in our local board here where kids they see the behaviors that happen in these shows, and they want to imitate them. Of course, you see them when you go to YouTube, and they post them on YouTube, and you can see the exact same things that are happening in the movie theaters and that our kids are trying. And how popular are these? Well, look, they've spawned so many generations of the next films. They go from, if you think about Jackass, it was originally a movie, spawns into a TV show, becomes, very, very popular. And similar, we can talk about Nitro Circus. Just want to talk a little bit down in your right-hand corner here, perfection in girls. So paralleling the dangers of copycatting what you see online or in TV shows or movies, there are a variety of websites dedicated to the promotion of anorexia or the promotion of bulimia. And these sites are designed to support youth with eating disorders. They want to support them. You have a eating disorder, we're going to support you by providing you a forum to share your story, and they endorse the disease. So it's not supporting people to get them help, it's support them to endorse it. So like many weight control ideas are provided as well as things called thinspirations, or pictures or video clips of thin people, or gross pictures of fatty foods. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. I'm thinking here for a second. I'm just going to get a reaction from Louise has mentioned how to use your control panel there. If everybody's with me so far, can you just give me a thumbs up? If you've never done one of these webinars or hosted one or provided one, it's so difficult to do because I can't see your faces. Do you remember where the thumb up is? See if you can find that. Hands up or thumb up. You can use your hand too. You'll see it up there underneath your name. Either one's fine. I got a few people with me so far. Good. Thank you. That's great. So as I mentioned before, our children and students look up to sports stars as well as celebrities, and celebrity role models are not necessarily the role models for our youth, and often are modeling much more than we ever would want them to model, like stars like Lindsay Lohan, Dennis Rodman, Matt Perry, Gerard Butler, Charlie Sheen, as you can see on the slide in front of you. And those that have died like Amy Winehouse or Michael Jackson or Whitney Houston are just some examples of celebrities that are engaging in substance abuse. Unfortunately, many young artists and celebrities are notorious partiers and drug users who've been in and out of rehab, like Amy Winehouse, whose lyrics, ironically say, "They tried to make me go to rehab. I said, no, no, no." Or arrested like, teen celebrity Lindsay Lohan. In shows like you see in the bottom left-hand corner, like Celebrity Rehab, take issues that should be personal and private, and they have celebrities showcase them for money. So, even when our artists may have good intentions, like in the top right-hand corner here, like Macklemore, he does have some good messages that he'd like to get across to our youth. Often we're prevented from using those messages because the lyrics in the songs have content and language that are inappropriate for our students. So again, we're getting what I talked about earlier, these mixed messages for our teens, and it's very confusing for them. Okay, Shanna. I'm going to call on Shanna at this point to lead the way for the next series of slides.
Great, thanks, Ray. So I don't have too much more of the bad stuff to tell you about, but I will tell you a little bit. I'm going to start here with stereotypes. So picking up from where Ray left off, what we know is there are a variety of stereotypes online and in our media. For example, we can think about Glee, and while it's a great television show with some great messages, it really does kind of show us those stereotypes that we perceive in high schools as they are. Even as cast members are graduating and moving on from the show, they're kind of replacing them with the same sort of cookie cutter type of character. There's the cranky cheerleading girl, and then there's the good looking male football player jock character. So as one leaves, they're replacing with another one. So they really are kind of keeping up with those stereotypes. When we think about a show like The Simpsons, it's a perfect example of stereotyping on television. Everything about that show is stereotyping what people would classify as the American family that we would all like to kind of poke fun at, but at the same time it's a lot of realistic scenarios that they face, and even the cast of characters that they show, very stereotypical, who owns the variety store, who does, the types of work that are done on the show. Continuing on from there, if we even think about video games, if you were to look at a video game, most women are sexualized in video games. If you look up at the top, that's a picture of the Hitman, an advertisement, and it's just beautifully executed, and the woman is in lingerie, and she's got just a bullet in her head, but she looks, beautiful. That's the kind of symbol that we have for Hitman, which is a very, tough video game with lots of gun violence in it. We can also think about using, WWE. If we think about a male character in WWE, we would see big muscles, tough-looking guys, body slamming, fighting. But clearly, if you play as a female character, they have to strip each other in order to win. And so, those stereotypes are always perpetuated in our media and in what our youth see. Moving ahead, this kind of plays into risky sexual behavior. And what's difficult is, everything that Ray has spoken to you about already kind of leads into this same topic here. When you think about the picture of the 4 girls standing on the left, they've got the girl groups. It's all about sexualizing the images and making yourself look more, attractive to people. Those are examples of Bratz Halloween costumes, and the Bratz are those characters on the right-hand side that they've kind of grown up. There's baby Bratz, there's the older Bratz, but it's all this kind of persona and clothing and kind of a way that young girls want to be like. And what it's scary is that advertising companies know this. They know that this is the kind of characterization that girls are looking to, and so they know if 8-year-olds want to strive to be 11-year-olds, they're going to target their marketing to them looking like 11-year-olds, but they still are only 8, or 9-year-old girls, and they're young. So it's something to think about as well. When we look at even our celebrities and our role models, we go into music videos. When you watch them, it makes girls think they have to behave a certain way to be sexy or to be liked by somebody, but it also makes boys believe that they have to behave a certain way for the same kind of respect. We have celebrities like Miley Cyrus, Kesha, Nicki Minaj. They do very questionable activities. Miley Cyrus had the pole dancing, and there's rumors about her giving lap dances and marijuana use. She's all by the age of 18 years old. What we also know is that girls and guys are also sending sexts. So that's messages that, whether it's a picture or just content, but it is something to do with a sexual activity. 20% of 14 to 18-year-olds have sent a sext, 40% have received those messages, and 25% have forwarded them on. Now we also know that the hard part is that even though kids know that these messages might be forwarded on, they still are more likely to do that. Youth nowadays, and as Ray mentioned, I do teach dance, so I get the opportunity to speak with a lot of mostly girls from the ages of 6 till 19 years old, and I have some boys. So we talk a lot about these things, especially when it comes to music and the kinds of media messages that they're receiving. But one of the biggest things that my older students tell me about is this idea of sexting as normalized behavior. It's become kind of a natural part of their lives. Boys feel like they're more popular if they have these pictures on their phone, and girls feel like it's almost like a form of relationship currency if they send these pictures to their boyfriend at the time. They feel like it's a method of, say, safe sex. If they're feeling pressure to do something physically, then if they send them this picture, it might buy themselves some time. So it is kind of scary to think that that's where we're going with this. There's also this new app at the top middle. It's an image of the Snapchat logo or icon, and it's a new app, and what happens is you can take a picture on your phone and it goes to another person on their phone, and they have a chance to look at it for a minimum of like 3 to 5 seconds. And so people are thinking that that's kind of funny, and they're taking just a half semi-naked picture of themselves and doing that Snapchat, thinking the other person only has a couple seconds to look at it and then it's gone. But in reality, you get a warning that there's a picture coming, and most people are pretty quick, especially if they have an iPhone or a smartphone, and they can just snap a picture of the picture that's been sent to them, and then those pictures are now being circulated. So there's just a lot of things. As Ray mentioned, with there's lyrics in songs like the Dirty Picture song by Tyler Cruz and Kesha. There's a message to kids that that's something that's fun to do, so then here they are wanting to send off these Snapchats. And then the only other picture on here is this picture that says, "Who needs brains when you have these?" It's just that same idea that, girls, once they have, that physical kind of sexualized body, why would they need to be intelligent anymore? They have, their sex that can push them forward in life. So now, that has been all the bad news, and I'm going to go into the good news now, because obviously there's a silver lining. We were just highlighting all the things, to keep in mind. There's obviously way more out there and way other things to think about. But the important thing is that there is good news behind all this, and it's all about media literacy and educating our youth. So one of the acronyms that we came up with that we like to use is something called PROTECT. And it's easy to remember because you can think of it in terms of that acronym, and then you think of, participate and share. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a second. Research and resources. Observing and modeling. So you'd want to make sure that, we are observing the behaviors of youth and using those teachable moments, but also modeling what we want them to do and see. Playing the music or talking about the lyrics in a song and explaining why maybe that's not an appropriate song to listen to. Talking about the consequences of viewing some of these things. And as the adults, enforcing those rules and restrictions. Helping kids chat safely and using their internet safely or their phones safely. Kids can be pretty sneaky with what they're doing on their phones. And then just providing them with those tips for the safe media use. So again, that's our acronym PROTECT. I'm going to go into detail about a couple of those right now. So for example, the participate and share. This is a great way for adults to get involved with what youth are doing, whether we're parents or teachers or just have the opportunity to work with youth. If you're parents, you can have a TV night, and if you PVR the shows, you can fast forward right through those commercials, and then your kids aren't being targeted by that marketing. There's fun shows like Cash Cab or Mythbusters. There's tons of singing shows, dancing shows. There's even, there's cooking shows like Chopped or Sweet Genius or the Cupcake Wars, where you can see kind of a lot of fun things that way. As a teacher or parent, you can create a playlist. If you look up certain artists, I found that One Direction is pretty good. Bruno Mars, for the most part, is good. Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez. They still have fairly appropriate songs that are, good for kids with some good messages. And then you're in control again of the kinds of music that they're listening to. We know that if kids watch a music video once, every time they hear the song again, even just listening to it, they'll be visualizing whatever it is that they see. So, it's important to also make sure if you're going to play songs to watch those music videos first and make sure that the message in the video is also good. Choosing family-friendly games to play together. You can use, even We Fit or We Sport, any of those. Book clubs. The neat thing about having a book club with a family or in the school is you could read a book like The Hunger Games or Twilight, and you have all these opportunities to be talking to youth about the messages that they're hearing in these books. Again, it's not about sheltering them and pretending that this isn't going on. It's about educating them so that they're able to know that what they're consuming is entertainment and not something that they need to strive to be like. Same with film studies. A neat thing about generating or creating a social networking profile or a website or a blog is, as adults, we are a little bit nervous. Kids know so much. They're the digital natives. They've grown up with this technology and are able to just use it really easily. And as adults, it's something that we have to learn a little bit more and work harder at. But when you create that together and you give them that sense of responsibility, then kids are able to teach us what to do, and they think that that's kind of neat. So, even if you do that in your classroom or as a parent at home, it gives you kind of the upper hand on learning the technology, learning the safety precautions, and also being able to monitor them at the same time. Obviously discussing news events together and then watching positive YouTube videos. There's great videos on there like Message Me, Dub Evolution. TeacherTube is a great resource as well. Lots of things. And you know what, it's neat because as you're doing these things, say for example you're on YouTube and you're looking at videos, there's always the option to flag something that comes up that is inappropriate. So once again, that's teaching your kids that, or your students, that if they see something inappropriate, they should take action right away. There's content on there that they don't like, or there's mean messages. Maybe there's a great video, but there's a bunch of mean posts underneath it. Well, then you can flag it and you can show them how that's done and educate them on why that's important to take action right away. It's also easy to obviously block or remove certain channels from your YouTube, so you could do that as well, or even block or remove channels from your television. So when we look at research and resources, there are a lot of websites here, and there's a variety of different options. So there's websites here for kids, there's websites here to get help on how to use things, or just getting help on different sort of issues that kids or youth are facing. There's websites for learning how to report if you see something that you don't like. And there's also websites for just adult education. If you look under internet safety, obviously cyberbullying.ca is a great website. It's got lots of information. And Kids in the Know is pretty cool because it's a website that kids have developed about cyberbullying. That'snotcool.com is a great website. It's got these call-out cards that kids can use to inform a friend or somebody that they are making them uncomfortable, that they are cyberbullying. If you look at the mental health research section, CAMH has a lot of great information. Deal.org is by the RCMP and they have some stuff. But then you've got websites like Mind Your Mind that have fabulous teacher resources on there for teaching kids about mental health. You've got Not Myself Today, which is a website designed for kids and youth and adolescents about, they don't quite feel like themselves, and then they can kind of talk about it. When we look at the text messaging and social networking, you've got websites like NetLingo that'll help us adults learn what the kids are talking about. The other day, one of my dancers was referring to Molly, and I wasn't really sure, so I asked her, and she informed me that that was the new code word for ecstasy, actually. It's a short form for molecular. So people call it that now. And you wouldn't know, and I guess a couple new songs have been released where some rap artists are talking about that, and her mother actually had told her that it was kind of a catchy song, and she had laughed about it because obviously the mom didn't realize that the song was all about using ecstasy. So, we can keep up as adults. Texted.ca is the same. It's the way you can keep up on different texting lingo that kids are using. Thinline.org is a really neat website. It's actually by MTV, which again can add to those mixed messages that kids face because there's a lot of not so great television on MTV. But a Thin Line is an online quiz that youth can take, and what they can do is evaluate their digital line. So are they using their digital media appropriately, or are they abusing it? And what actually comes up, if they are abusing it, then there's a suggestion for how to revert back to using it properly. And obviously facebook.com/security, you can go on and find out more information about how to protect yourself. When we look under the For Parents section, I'm going to tell you all about Common Sense Media in a second. It's a great website. But even like onlinefamily.norton, that's a great website for parents, and I'll tell you about that as well. Under the film, radio, and television, we have lots of things. The CRTC, Internet Movie Database, you can go on and read about the movies that are coming up. You've got the tvboss.org, which tells you again about TV shows that you're watching. But the CRTC, you can go on and see ratings, and you can also report things that you see. And then just some other resources, like Love is Louder campaign, the Hey Ugly campaign, mediasmart.ca, some great resources for teachers, as well as just information, and then ad standards, things like that. So tons of research and resources there, and those are just some of them, and I'll go into detail now. So I already told you a little bit about a Thin Line, and GoGoStat is a great website as well for parents who want to kind of monitor what their kids are doing, especially with their cell phones. Onlinefamily.norton, I was an ambassador for that program a while ago, and I really feel like it's a great program because it's free for parents, and what it is it's just a little application that you can download, and it allows you to become part of your child's online life. And especially with working parents, it's hard to monitor the internet usage, so with the software, you basically can maintain a consistent and supportive role in your kids' lives online. You explore the internet with them, and you can set up house rules, and it's not a secret thing that you're doing. Your kids would know that, and the same thing, you could set it up in your classroom and your students would know that. And there's different settings you could use, so maybe you allow 1 hour of internet use in the evening. But if you weren't home for some reason, say there's some reason why you have to be out, maybe there's parent-teacher interviews, then you could set that up to say, your child at home has 1 hour to use the internet, and maybe they're working on a project. Well, then a little pop-up will come up, and they'll give them the opportunity to say, I'm working on this project right now, could I have an extension? And it will go to you, and you'll be able to either allow them to have an extension to use the internet or not. But it all kind of opens up that dialogue about the internet and helping make sure that your kids are surfing safely. It keeps a record of websites that kids go to. And kids know that too. They'll be able to see that there's that record being kept, but if they try to erase their browser history, you still have that as well, and you're able to kind of print out monthly reports on what websites and how often did your children go to that. So it's kind of neat at school too. You could see what their favorite websites are, and kind of look at in math class at how percentages, how many people went to this website this often. My Mobile Watchdog is a really good one if you want to monitor text messages. It's $5 a month, I believe, still, and there are some limited options to it, but there are new ones coming out all the time, so it's worth just taking a look if you were concerned about how kids are using their cell phones. And then Media Smarts is the former Media Awareness Network, so there's lots of great resources on that as well. So moving to Common Sense Media, let's have you use those tools again. And if you can show me whether or not, with a show of hands, or you can raise your hand or give me a smiley face or thumbs up if you've been to Common Sense Media or used this website before. So I know there's a smiley face, and when you look at it, you can see applause, or you can see approval, smiley face. So we have 1 or 2 people that have been to it. Great. Well, what it's all about, it's a fabulous website. Basically, you can go on this website and pretty much find out about any type of media that you're interested in. This is an example of where the wolves are. And so you can go on and type in, where the wolves are, and it'll basically tell you it's rated by parents and adults. And so they'll say, it's appropriate for age 9. It's a very easy rating scale because the green obviously means it's good, yellow means I don't know, caution, and red is no, it's not good. And then they give it a 4-star rating. And then what does Common Sense say? So common sense will then tell you, when we click on it, why they rated it on, or a good resource, or an okay resource for ages 9 and up. And the neat thing is it tells you the good stuff, so it says what kind of messages are in it, what role models are in it, but then what to watch out for. If there's violence, if there's sex, if there's bad language, is there consumerism, drinking, drugs, and smoking, and it tells you all this. You can do it for movies, there's television shows on there, there's some music things, songs on there that you can look up. So there's lots of great information on that. There's even stuff on video games now. So it's pretty neat. It's, again, parent and professional reviews, and then you can also sign up for an e-newsletter that tells you what's popular. At Christmas time, for those people that celebrate Christmas, they did put out an an email came out that said, what are some of the top good presents to buy for children, or what are some of the good things to kind of be talking about in your classes. So it's pretty great that way. There's also some lesson plans and web resources that they've developed for media literacy and cyberbullying and things like that as well that you can download. They also have gotten into research. Now they're looking at, how do kids use their media, what are they interested in, all that stuff. So they like to look at, these are kind of the common topics that they kind of analyze something on. So physical violence, language, educational value, alcohol, drug, and tobacco use, sexual content, and then they examine the message and what are kids actually learning from using or listening to that piece of music, using that game, or viewing that movie or television show. So now we're going to move into the next section, and this is to do with the lessons that we developed to address some of the issues about the representation of youth in media. And I want to give a special acknowledgement to the Canadian Women's Foundation, who funded us to write these lessons in the first place, and the Teen National Learning Strategy with the status of women. So these lessons are available on their website, but they're also available on our website as well, and I've got the link at the very end posted on the slide for you. So I'll just go through now what kind of is involved with this little mini unit that we've developed. So it's called the Representation of Youth in Media, and there's 3 lessons. I'm going to say it is 3 lessons that are 75 minutes in length, but if you wanted to, you could definitely expand this out to be many more lessons. They are pretty jam-packed, and there's a lot of information, and I'm sure that with youth there'll be a lot of great dialogue that will come up. So the first lesson is called Media as Construction, Media Violence and Desensitization, and it's looking at how media is constructed with a focus on the rates of media violence in popular media. Kids talk about, or youth will talk about, how they need to be critical consumers of media because it is all made up and constructed. Somebody did think this through about what they might like. And it'll conclude by looking at, or kids will go home and do a media analysis and look at celebrities as role models, and they'll discuss celebrities versus reality celebrities. The next lesson is about deconstructing that representation of youth in the media, and they review how media promotes those unrealistic images, expectations, and stereotypes about youth. So there'll be some content, like we showed you earlier in the presentation. They'll analyze media examples for stereotypes and discuss the representation and expectation of males and females based on what they see in the media. So they'd say, what do they see in the media about boys? What do they see in the media about girls? What do they see in the media about anything, anybody else, race, gender, sex, sexuality, all those things. And then finally they'll look at music lyrics and how the content can add to the expectation and pressures that you face. Then that moves itself into the Healthy Digital Lives and Healthy Digital Relationships lesson, where they look at those stereotypes again and the expectations and how this seeps into their digital lives. So there's a particular focus obviously on social networking and digital media because definitely those are how youth construct their own identities. There is a bit of a discussion about, Facebook. All you see on Facebook is really what people want you to see. It's not really their life. People only show what they want you to see. So they are, in a sense, constructing their own representation of themselves using those technologies. So we do talk about that in the lesson. It looks at what a healthy digital relationship and an unhealthy digital relationship look like. And then that leads into an opportunity for you to examine the impacts of media and technology and what they have and the expectations of their relationships and how to become critical consumers of media. And then it concludes with students discussing and deciding on healthy boundaries and limits for their own media and technology use. So there's a lot of information in there. So as you can see, it really can lengthen out. It is 75 minutes in length and geared towards youth age 13 to 16, but again, you could take out some of the messages and focus on a little bit younger or a little bit older. So clicking to the next slide here, there is a lot of additional information for facilitators. There are 7 definitions, for example, like media is defined, codes and creeds and construction, all those words are defined, what the 4 C's of media literacy are, what a stereotype is, just so that you can tell your classes that, so that way everyone's on the same page when you start that out. There's also 9 web resources, so some of the same web resources that we've already given you throughout the presentation, the one that Ray gave you at the beginning from the APP, as well as some of the other ones like Common Sense Media is on there, the camh.net is on there, and those different websites. So whether they're giving you as the teacher additional resources and research, or whether it's also to support the lesson content, however you want to use it. And then there's 3 books listed that include the instructional strategies that we use in the lessons. So again, if you find those strategies to be useful, then maybe you want to take a look at the book and see some of the other strategies in action. So the lesson structure, it starts off obviously with the title and the 3 key objectives for the lessons. So you can obviously show that to your class, or you know what they are then. Everyone knows what the kind of structure of the lesson is going to be. Then there's notes to the facilitator about the lesson, and this includes things to prepare in advance, research that you might want to review prior to giving the lesson, and other important notes. A list of materials is provided for each lesson. It'll tell you, to make photocopies, or that you might need a smartboard or a VCR, oh my goodness, a DVD player, something like that. And it'll tell you even the names of the handouts that you need to photocopy. Then the teaching and learning strategies are outlined, and this takes you through all the information you'll need to implement the lesson, including some suggested responses, prompting cues, and instructions for students. And then most of the activities throughout are designed to have an introduction piece where the teacher would provide information or make links to past content for students. Then there's an activity where the learning portion takes place, and then a debriefing or a concluding note is made by the teacher. The lessons and the activities have definitely been designed in a way to facilitate learning through repetition, making connections, and coming full circle. Everything kind of will work off of something else. And as I said, there's definitely more than enough content to fill 75 minutes, so if you feel you run out of time, that's probably normal. We tried to put in as much as we possibly could, just because there is so much that teachers can do with kids to help them learn and be able to really critically consume their media and evaluate what they're using and seeing. There's also ways to extend the lessons, so 3 to 5 extensions have been provided per lesson if you wanted to take it further. And then after the lesson content and instructions, there are master copies of the handouts, and they're marked with the word handout at the top, and teacher resource pages marked with the word resource at the top. So that would be, say there was questions or an activity that your class had to do, then there would be some suggested responses. And obviously nothing is exhaustive, so you'd want to have a quick look at what the responses were, the answers were, and then add to it. It was just kind of us giving you something to go from. So to take a look at these strategies, once again, let's use those, the hand or the smiley face or anything to tell me whether or not you've used any of these types of strategies. So Barry Bennett or tribes. So we've got things like think, pair, share, numbered heads, scramble, huddle up, graphic organizer, graffitis, post-it pilot, PMI, looks like, sounds like, feels like, myths and facts, and there's exit cards. So those are all the strategies that are used in these 3 lessons. All of our programming uses strategies like this collaborative strategies, because we find that it encourages youth to think and share and gain perspective. And throughout each lesson, youth are learning from each other, from themselves, and from the teacher. And the strategies encourage youth to share and work cooperatively in safe, meaningful ways, so they feel comfortable breaking down those stereotypes and assumptions, especially when you're discussing media. I find that kids look to each other and they wait for somebody else to respond. Like, they don't want to seem like either they're cool or they're not cool, or maybe they're not allowed to watch something at home, so they don't want to answer. And the nice thing about these strategies is it allows them to come together as a group, or even just with a partner, and have that kind of dialogue and learning from each other. So it's not like I'm pointing at one person and asking them to answer what's your opinion on this or what do you think this message is. It gives them lots of room to share and discuss with each other. Students are not put on the spot to give an answer on their own. They've got time to think and consult with friends, hear their opinions, share on behalf of the partner or the group. And it just gives them some time to hear somebody else's point of view, and maybe that changes their own point of view. And then, as I said, debriefing. We always debrief every activity because it's a key component, and the facilitator or the teacher will debrief some aspect of it and make connection to either the lesson or the unit as a whole to the next activity, some sort of kind of cyclical way that this all will work together. Now, that is actually where we come to the very end, where we're at the questions. And I'm sure that there will be some questions. I will let you know that where it says www.youthrelationships.org, documents representation of youth in media.pdf, that is where you can access these lessons. They are obviously free. They're available on the website. And then that is our email, the4thR@uwo.ca, and our website with other resources is youthrelationships.org. Ray mentioned that we've been involved in this for 8 years. We do have a section on there with other lessons and information about teaching media and there's lesson plans on there for JK all the way through to grade 12 with additional resources. So I guess at that point, are there any questions?
I have a question. I'm curious in your work with the educators whether or not there's a sense that parents feel that it's up to teachers and activities in the classroom to ensure that their kids learn these kinds of things, or are parents communicating that it's a balance, or are parents saying we don't want you teaching our kids? Is there some sense around that?
Well, we certainly haven't experienced the resistance from parents that we should not be doing this. For the most part, it's the opposite. Many parents, when we do parent presentations, many parents feel overwhelmed by the topic, and they're looking for assistance. So that's generally the case. Yep.
Are there any strands in the curriculum that tie specifically to some of this? I know that there is a fair bit that's within it. Are any of those strands parts that are being assessed, or is it more prevalent in certain units and grade levels?
Well, there is a media strand that that was added. I can't remember now, 2 or 3 years ago. Some of the educators might be able to help me with that one there. So I mean, that is there already in the Ontario curriculum. However, not until recently, where it was typically left up to the classroom teacher to do that integration and make that connection. But a few years ago, as Shanna's mentioned, we've been involved in a project that we developed, resources for teachers right from K to the end of high school to demonstrate how they could meet those outcomes and put together some units of study. So there there are other hit and miss, there are other resources out there, but for the most part, it's been left up to the classroom teacher to develop it. So I encourage people, if you're not aware of that resource, it's available on not only our website, but a number of different websites, and was developed by way of the Ministry of Education supplying the funds through that coalition, which I don't think I'd mentioned. We had a coalition through OPSPA. I think I did mention at the beginning. So through all our partners that were involved in that. So, please have a look at that.
Fantastic. I'm wondering if any of the teachers that are here want to share some of the things that they might have done in the classroom or experiences that they've had with students.
In addition to that, I'd be very interested from any of the participants. Are you aware of a resource that we haven't mentioned tonight that you think would be useful for other teachers to use related to this topic? well, that can be either good news or bad news. You know, it's an emerging topic. It's a topic. Takes an incredible amount of effort to stay up to date with this topic. And you know, I think you can garner from Shanna's talk. You know, she's involved very closely with this, and on a daily basis has to do updates. You know, whether it's a presentation that we're doing tonight, and as she mentioned, you know, she's learning, and you're hearing from your students. I mean, you're learning all the time from the students. There's always some new technology that's coming available, or some new lingo that we, you know, that we have to respond to. Even the lessons that, you know, I have to admit, even the lessons that we developed 2 to 3 years ago, I guess now, are being dated, and they in fact should be updated every single year given the nature of this topic. So that presents a challenge for teachers in terms of delivery, no doubt about it.
I'm just going to post the link. Actually, you know what? I'm going to try the web tour option just to see how we do with it tonight. This is a pair of photographs that I came across on Twitter today of Dove's new campaign. And guys, you can give us a green check mark if you can see the image there. Okay, so I thought these were interesting when, you know, we're talking about sexualization of girls through the media, and certainly we put a lot of responsibility on the media sources for kind of causing some of that, but it is cool to see the you know, some big companies that are trying to combat that a little bit. Certainly there's still something in it for them, and that's something to certainly talk about kids. But if you scroll down, if you just grab the scroll bar at the right hand side of the screen, there's a second photo a little bit lower than that as well, and I thought that this was really interesting to come across today. And I didn't find it on the Dove website, but I came across it on Twitter. I'm just seeing Barry's comment there. Oh, Maureen, do you want to jump on and say something? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I mentioned before that I think a lot of this is geared toward, not a lot of it, but a lot of it I sense is directed towards girls. And even looking at these last 2 slides, again, it's girls. I just wonder, is there something that would help me get my head around how boys are being affected by the media?
Shanna, do you want to comment on that? Because you're absolutely right. Tonight's presentation, maybe we overrepresented the impact it's having on girls and didn't balance that. But it is, I mean, we do have slides, and in our presentation we do include the impact on boys. And in fact, in the lessons that were created that Shanna was just talking about, we certainly make that connection. Do you want to mention more about that, Shanna?
Sure. I guess what it is with boys is it's more to do with, you know, them being big and tough and strong, and it's all those kinds of messages that they get. And maybe the focus is becoming more on girls because it seems like there is more and more, you know, advertisements and media aimed at girls because they're the ones who are, I guess, bigger consumers and things like that. But I know boys often feel like they have to fit into some certain type of stereotype or some mold that is projected to them on television, whether they have to be that, you know, the jock, the great athlete, or they have to be, you know, somebody who isn't very intelligent or is only like a nerd or something. Like they'll tell me that those are the things that they feel like they have to fit into. But I guess it is, you know, they still are dealing with the same types of things that girls are dealing with. I know that some of the girls that I work with will tell you that boys feel pressure because of what they see in the media to behave disrespectfully towards girls, and they feel pressure to, like I said about the sexting, they feel pressure to ask for pictures or messages or content or things like that that they wouldn't necessarily want to ask for, but they have other boys, I guess, asking them if they have that, and they're getting made fun of if they don't have a picture on their phone, say, for example. So they're getting pressure in those kinds of ways. Pressures to be kind of macho and a bit tougher and to be the one that kind of is dominating, I guess. And we do have some great resources and some great information on, especially when it comes to media and advertising and the roles of boys and girls. What's neat about this unit, or this mini unit, is there is a lesson, an activity in lesson 2 where you kind of put a box on the board and you say, you know, what does it mean to be a boy in the media? What does it mean to be a girl in the media? And you write all that, and then you kind of decode it and say, you know, like what are we really? Why do we feel that we have to be this way because of the media? Why do boys feel like they can't cry? They have to have big muscles. They have to treat girls disrespectfully, or vice versa. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
No, definitely. Sorry about that. I was going to say yes, definitely. Thank you. It does. It also makes me wonder about just the link with video games and the amount of time maybe boys spend on video games, and kind of the impact that has, thinking back to your original slide about talking about violence and just that kind of exposure that sometimes the kids get when they play video games, and whether or not most of those kids playing it are more male than female.
Yeah, I think you've really zeroed in on the impact that it is having on boys. And as Shanna's mentioned, actually, when we developed those lessons for the Canadian Women's Foundation, obviously they were developed with a gendered analysis. So when we take a look at the impact on girls, it is, you know, the victimization of girls in terms of violence, etc., is not equal to boys. It is greater. However, when we look at areas in terms of the impact of media violence and look at, for example, the consumption of violent video games and the amount of time that boys or girls spend on imitating violent acts, the boys are spending more time on the violent video games. The boys are spending far more time imitating the violent acts, whether regardless if we're talking about jackass imitations, etc. So, and then the impact that it's having on them in terms of, if you remember back to that slide, the psychological impact, the impact in terms of desensitization, etc. We are seeing that with a combination of things. If your sport idol is the #1 fighter in the NHL, that's your #1 hero. You're playing violent video games all the time. You're witnessing violence at home. You have no skill level to de-escalate conflict in a non-violent way. These are all additive, and the resulting, we're going to see it play out in a more aggressive person. We were going to see, when you do an analysis of all the school shooters in the U.S., what did they have in common? They all had in common that they were heavy consumers of violent video games. So when you go back and I'm urging everybody to read the studies from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and although there's still some debate going on this obviously with the developers of video games that say it doesn't have that impact, common sense tells you that there's some correlation here. So I think you're definitely right on track.
Thanks.
Could I ask one more question here, Louise? I'm just wondering, with the participants tonight, is there something more that would help you as a parent or as a teacher? Any resources that come to mind that you would like to suggest to us that to either develop or direct you to?
Do you have any recommendations? I teach grade 3. And I've done I can't remember the exact name, the Center for Media Awareness. I've used some of their resources. What else would you suggest for a teacher working with young kids?
There's a lesson on our website. It's great. There's a couple. There's a mini unit for grades 2 to 3, but there's also a full unit, I think it's about 7 lessons, on talking about superheroes and what they see you know, whether it's the Hulk or those different characters. Obviously, like Ray said, it's a couple years old, so you'd have to update it. But it actually really does kind of zone in on the princess effect on young girls, as well as that superhero effect on young boys, and right away from a young age how they're targeted to be, you know, the damsel in distress or this big hulking character that's going to come to the rescue. So that's kind of I think it's a great unit to start off younger children and figuring out kind of those roles and starting to decode them early, so they're realizing that, you know, these are fiction and these are entertainment, and that's not what I have to be. So again, that's, if you go to our website, it's on there under media literacy or critical media literacy initiative.
So do I access the website that I'm looking on at the screen right now?
Yes, if you go to youthrelationships.org, and then down the left-hand side there's media literacy, or critical media literacy. I'm just actually going to log on to the website right now and make sure I've got that name right.
While Shanna does
Sorry.
that, I'll just remind everyone. Oh, go ahead, Shanna.
I was just going to say, if you go to the youthrelationships.org website and then click on the left-hand side, there's a column called Research and Consulting. At the very top of that is where you find the Canadian Women's Foundation lessons, the representation of youth in media, and there's a spot to click and download. But then if you go down a little bit on that page, there's something called Critical Media Literacy, and when you click on that link, that's where it takes you to these units. So for example, in the elementary, there's JK, K in grade 1 is live action and animation, a unit on that, a unit on good versus evil. Grades 2 and 3, there's a unit on storyboards and animation, a unit on violence and humor, and a unit on society versus screens. And I was wrong, it's actually 4, 5, and 6 that has the sensationalized superheroes unit. And there's also one on impacts and influences of media, but it goes on. There's secondary unit topics for politics and citizenship course, leadership course, media studies, 1P English, 2P, 3C, 4C, and there's also a parent brochure that's downloadable as well. And all those are free to download. Again, some of them are a couple years old, so they might need some updates, but that'll help.
Thank you.
There are definitely extensive resources there too. I just downloaded the Representation of Youth in Media, and it is 27 pages of fantastic stuff to share in your classroom. Chris, I just saw yours there. Here, I am going to just drop the link in again that's directly to the page that Shanna was just talking about, the Research and Consulting page. Go ahead, Syria. Your mic's not on, Syria, if you're talking.
Yes, it does help to turn on the mic. The link that I put in is something that's been shared by Craig Anderson, who's done research on violent video games. He was a keynote at our conference, at the OTF conference in 2010. So that's an interesting link that you might want to look into also.
Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take everyone to our, there's your closing remarks, and our thank you screen. And Siri, I'll let you jump in and say thank you in a second. I just want to say, for those of you that are still here, if you click on the orange big tiny URL link that's right in the middle of the screen, that will take you to our feedback page. I'm also going to put that link right here in the chat. And we do like to hear back from our participants regarding each session. It helps shape what follows and what other programs we shape for you. And the further link lower down is, of course, back to the OTF Connect homepage, where all our future upcoming sessions are. And Siri, I'll let you talk about those as well. So, and you will get an email tomorrow. It's got a link to all the resources. Shanna and Ray, I'm going to ask you if it's okay if I copy all the web links off of that one slide you have in the various categories, and I'll just post all those links as well on the on the resource page for this particular workshop, and then people can just quickly pop in there and grab stuff. And of course, all the other sites, the Canadian Women's Foundation and CAMH and youthrelationships.org will all be on there as well. So thank you, everyone. And Syria, go ahead and pop in with your few words.
Thank you, Louise. And of course, thank you so much, Shanna and Ray, for a very, very informative presentation. Reminding us of the harsh realities of the stereotypes in the media that our students are exposed to, but then sharing so many very effective, positive ideas and resources to help guide and educate our students to become critical consumers of media. I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight, taking away from your family time, but I guess it's kind of nice because you're right there at home with your family. Please do take a few minutes and fill in the exit survey and share your suggestions. We do use your feedback. We read your comments every night after the session is over and look at ways of improving the program as a whole. Also, please share the OTF Connect site with your colleagues and encourage them to check out the upcoming session. We do have a second media violence prevention workshop, and that's the end of May, and it's on domestic violence in the workplace. Thank you again, and again, thank you, Ray and Shanna, for making this possible tonight. I appreciate everything that you've done and all your great resources that you've shared with all of us.
You're quite welcome, and thank you again for everyone who took the time to participate. Take care.